I have been living with the wrong person my whole life, and I didn't even know it. I remember the day everything changed as if it were yesterday. The sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow over the breakfast table where I sat with my daughter Emma. She was 12, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, her eyes sparkling with the kind of innocence that made my heart swell with pride. We were laughing over pancakes, the smell of maple syrup filling the air, and for a moment, I felt like the world was perfect. I had a loving husband, a beautiful daughter, and a home that felt safe. But beneath that surface, I sensed a tension I couldn't quite name, a whisper of unease that had been growing louder in my mind. "Mom, can we talk about my college applications after school?" Emma asked, her voice breaking through my thoughts. I smiled, nodding enthusiastically. "Of course, sweetheart. I can't believe you're already thinking about college. It feels like just yesterday you were starting kindergarten." She giggled, and I felt a rush of warmth. I cherished these moments, the simple joys of motherhood, the laughter that filled our home. But as I looked at her, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Mark, my husband, had been distant lately. He was often preoccupied, his phone glued to his hand, and I had noticed the late nights at work becoming more frequent. I tried to push the nagging thoughts aside, convincing myself that he was just busy with his job. After all, he was a dedicated provider, and I loved him for that. But the way he avoided my gaze during dinner, the way he would turn his phone face down on the table, made my heart race with anxiety. I wanted to trust him, to believe that everything was fine, but the whispers in my mind grew louder. That evening, as I cleaned up after dinner, I heard the front door slam shut. I turned to see Mark standing in the hallway, his face pale and drawn. He was packing a suitcase, clothes flying out of the drawers as if he were in a race against time. My heart dropped. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't look up, just continued to shove shirts into the bag, his movements frantic and erratic. "Mark, please talk to me. What's happening?" I reached out, grabbing his arm, but he shrugged me off like I was a stranger. "I'm leaving, Sarah," he said, finally meeting my eyes. What I saw there terrified me, nothing but cold determination. "I need to breathe again." The words hit me like a physical blow, and I felt the world around me spin. 22 years of marriage, and this was how it ended. Him throwing clothes into a suitcase while I stood there in my pajamas, blindsided and broken. "Is there someone else?" The question slipped out before I could stop it, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something flicker across his face, guilt, perhaps, but it was gone in an instant. "This isn't about anyone else," he replied, his voice flat. "I just need to go." I felt a wave of panic wash over me. "Where will you go?" I asked, my voice small and desperate. "I'll figure it out," he said, zipping the suitcase with finality. I ran downstairs, my bare feet slapping against the hardwood floors, my heart racing. Emma was sitting at the kitchen table, her cereal untouched, concern creasing her brow. "Mom, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. "Nothing, sweetheart. Dad's just going on a trip," I lied, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. I grabbed my laptop, fingers shaking as I logged into our bank account. The page loaded, and I stared at the screen in disbelief. Our checking account showed $247.83. Our savings account showed zero. Emma's college fund, the one we'd been feeding for 12 years, showed zero. "No," I whispered, refreshing the page, praying it was a mistake. But the numbers didn't change. I checked the transaction history and felt my stomach drop. 3 days ago, while I was at my book club meeting, Mark had transferred everything. Not just his half, not just our shared money, but Emma's future too. My hands trembled as I called the bank, praying for a miracle, but the customer service representative confirmed what I already knew. Mark had full access to all accounts. The transfers were legitimate. "Mom!" Emma's voice broke through my haze of panic. "You're scaring me." I looked at her, really looked at her. She was still in her school uniform, her dark hair pulled back, her backpack ready by the door. She had no idea that her father had just stolen her future and walked away. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made us both turn. Mark appeared, dragging his suitcase behind him, walking past us like we were furniture, heading straight for the front door. "That's it." I found my voice, stronger than I expected. 22 years, and you're just walking away." He paused, hand on the doorknob, glancing back at Emma for maybe 3 seconds. "You'll understand when you're older," he said, and then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a quiet click that somehow sounded louder than if he'd slammed it. Emma and I stood in the sudden silence of our kitchen, the coffee maker gurgling, the refrigerator humming. "Is he coming back?" she asked, her voice small. I wanted to lie, to protect her, to say that Daddy just needed some time. But looking at her face, I realized she already knew the answer. "I don't think so, baby," I said, my heart breaking. She nodded, processing this information with the careful consideration I had come to admire in her. "Did he take our money?" she asked, catching me off guard. "Some of it," I said carefully. "My college fund, too." I couldn't speak. I just nodded. Emma picked up her cereal bowl and walked it to the sink, rinsing it out, drying it, putting it away in the cabinet. Then she turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before on her young face. "Mom, don't worry. I handled it." The words were so unexpected, so calmly delivered that I almost laughed. Handled what? She was 12 years old. What could she possibly have handled? But something in her tone made me pause. There was no childish bravado, no empty comfort, just quiet confidence, like she knew something I didn't. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" I asked, but she just picked up her backpack and headed toward the door. "I'll miss my bus if I don't leave now. We'll talk after school, okay?" And then she was gone, leaving me alone in a house that suddenly felt enormous and empty, filled with questions I couldn't answer and a future I couldn't see. The first week without Mark was a blur of emotions. The house felt different, not just empty but watchful somehow. I found myself crying at random moments, folding his abandoned laundry, seeing his coffee mug still in the dishwasher, hearing Emma's alarm clock through the walls each morning. But Emma moved through our shattered world like nothing had changed. Every morning at 7:15, she'd appear in the kitchen, fully dressed, backpack organized, lunch packed. She'd kiss my cheek and say, "Have a good day, Mom," in the same cheerful tone she'd used when we were still a complete family. I was falling apart piece by piece, but I couldn't tell her that. "Just checking on you," I'd say, but deep down, I was terrified of what was happening to us. I had lost my husband, my financial security, and now I feared I might lose my daughter too. Little did I know, Emma was already planning to fight back. As the days turned into weeks, the house felt like a shell of its former self. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, haunted by memories of laughter and love that now felt like distant echoes. Emma, however, seemed to adapt with an uncanny resilience. Each morning, she would rise with the sun, her routine unbroken, her demeanor calm and collected. I often found myself watching her, marveling at how she navigated this new reality with a maturity that belied her age. One morning, as I poured myself a cup of coffee, I noticed Emma sitting at the kitchen table, her laptop open, fingers flying across the keyboard. "What are you working on, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my heart raced with curiosity and concern. She looked up, her dark eyes sparkling with a mix of excitement and determination. "Just some research for school," she replied, but there was something in her tone that made me pause. "Research on what?" I pressed, leaning against the counter, my instincts kicking in. Emma hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. "You know, just some stuff about financial security and how to protect yourself." My heart sank. How could my 12-year-old daughter be researching financial security? The weight of our situation pressed down on me, and I felt a wave of panic wash over me. "Emma, you don't have to worry about that right now," I said gently, trying to reassure her. "You should focus on school and being a kid." But she shook her head, her expression serious. "Mom, I need to know. Dad took our money. He stole my future. I can't just sit here and do nothing." Her words struck me like a lightning bolt. I had been so consumed by my own grief and confusion that I hadn't considered how deeply this was affecting her. "I know, honey. I'm so sorry," I said, my voice breaking. "But we'll figure it out together." Emma nodded, but I could see the determination in her eyes. She was not just a victim, she was ready to fight back. That evening, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that Emma was hiding something from me. I had seen the way she typed with purpose, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about her research. I felt a mix of pride and fear. What was she planning? The next day, I decided to call my sister, Janet, for advice. I needed someone to talk to, someone who could help me make sense of this chaos. As I dialed her number, I could hear Emma upstairs, the sound of rapid clicking drifting down through the floorboards. "Sarah, how are you holding up?" Janet's voice was warm and concerned. "I don't know," I admitted, sinking onto the couch. "Emma's being so strong, but I'm worried she's bottling everything up." "Some kids process differently," Janet said. "Remember when Dad left? You cried for weeks, but Emma might be handling it in her own way." I nodded, but unease settled in my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that Emma was carrying a burden far heavier than I realized. After hanging up, I made Emma's favorite dinner, grilled cheese and tomato soup. I knocked on her door around 6:30, carrying the tray. "Come in," she called. I pushed the door open, and Emma was sitting at her desk, her laptop screen angled away from me. "Brought you some food, honey," I said, placing the tray down. "What were you working on?" "Just homework," she replied, but I caught a glimpse of a screen before she minimized whatever she'd been viewing. It looked like an email program, not a school document. "Need any help?" I asked casually, but she dismissed me with a polite smile. "I'm good. Thanks for dinner." As I left her room, unease gnawed at me. Over the next few days, the pattern continued. Emma maintained her perfect routine, while I spiraled deeper into confusion and grief. I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning with panic attacks, checking our bank accounts obsessively, calling Mark's number just to hear his voicemail. Meanwhile, Emma emerged each morning looking rested and composed, her demeanor unwavering. Then, one evening, as I was putting away Emma's clean laundry, I noticed a single sheet of paper on her desk, partially hidden under her science textbook. I shouldn't have looked, but something about the formatting caught my eye. It was a printed email thread. My blood froze as I recognized the names at the top, Mark and Rebecca. My hands shook as I pulled the paper out, reading the messages dated from 3 weeks ago before Mark left. They discussed meeting times, hotel reservations, and something about handling me when the time came. "Emma!" I called, my heart racing. She appeared in the doorway, holding her empty dinner plate. "What's wrong?" she asked, her expression calm. "Where did this come from?" I held up the paper, my voice trembling. "Dad's not very good with passwords," she said, closing the door behind her. "How did you?" I started, but the words caught in my throat. "How long have you known about Rebecca?" 6 weeks, she replied, her voice steady. "About the money?" I figured that out the day before he left. "I felt sick. Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Emma sat beside me on the bed, suddenly looking more like the 12-year-old she actually was. "I wanted to be sure, and I wanted to figure out what to do about it." "Honey, this isn't your responsibility," I said, but she shook her head. "Yes, it is. He stole my college fund. He lied to both of us. Someone had to do something." I looked around her room, her organized desk, her careful routine, and I realized I didn't know my daughter at all. "What else do you know?" I asked, my heart pounding. Emma got up and pulled a spiral notebook from under her mattress. She handed it to me without hesitation. The pages were filled with handwritten notes, printed screenshots, diagrams I couldn't understand, and lists of numbers that might have been phone numbers or account information. "Emma, what is all this research?" I asked, my voice trembling. She sat back down beside me. "Dad thinks he's smart, but he's careless. He uses the same password for everything. He doesn't clear his browser history. He doesn't even log out of his accounts when he's done." I flipped through the pages, my stomach clenching. "This is incredible and terrifying," I said, struggling for words. "What are you planning to do with all this information?" "I'm still working on that part," she replied, her expression serious. "But don't worry, Mom. I've got this handled." There it was again, those words that sent chills down my spine. Emma was no longer just my little girl. She was becoming something else entirely. As the days passed, I watched in awe and fear as Emma transformed. She was conducting surveillance on her own father, gathering evidence of his deceit. I felt a mix of pride and dread. What had I unleashed? One evening, she opened her laptop and pulled up a folder labeled countermeasures. Inside were dozens of official-looking documents, fraud reports filed with credit agencies, complaints submitted to banking authorities, anonymous tips sent to Rebecca's employer. I've been working on this for 3 weeks, Emma explained. I documented everything first, then I started dismantling their plans piece by piece. My heart raced as I realized the extent of her actions. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Well, Rebecca got suspended from work yesterday. Her boss received an anonymous email with all the evidence of her embezzlement. Her clients are pulling their accounts. The state board is launching an investigation. I felt dizzy. You did that? I asked, my voice trembling. She stole money from elderly people saving for retirement. Mom, she deserved it. Emma's voice was steady, righteous. And that's just the beginning. She showed me more files, credit agencies that had frozen the fraudulent accounts opened in our names, the mortgage application for the Florida house that had been flagged and denied. They were going to disappear and leave us holding the debt, Emma said, her jaw tightening. But here's the thing. I caught them before they could complete the purchase. I stared at her, my mind racing. My daughter had become a force to be reckoned with, and I didn't know whether to be proud or terrified. What happens now? I asked, my voice shaking. Emma turned to me, her expression fierce. Now we wait. When Dad realizes what's happening, he'll panic. And when people panic, they make mistakes. I lay awake that night, my mind racing. Emma had taken control of our situation in a way I never could have imagined. But at what cost? What kind of person was she becoming? As I listened to the soft clicking of her keyboard, I felt a mix of fear and admiration. My daughter was fighting for us, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her in the process. The days that followed Emma's revelations were a whirlwind of tension and anticipation. I felt like I was living in a pressure cooker, the heat rising with every passing moment. Emma had taken control of our situation, and while I was proud of her, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that hung over us like a dark cloud. I watched as she meticulously organized her findings, her confidence growing with each piece of evidence she uncovered. It was both inspiring and terrifying to witness my daughter transform into a young woman who was ready to take on the world. One evening, as I sat on the couch, I heard Emma's voice from her room, calm and steady as she spoke on the phone. I strained to listen, my heart racing. Yes, I have all the documentation, she said. I can send you the emails and the bank statements. I know what he did. My breath caught in my throat. Who was she talking to? I felt a mix of pride and fear as I realized she was reaching out to someone for help, someone who could assist her in taking down her father. Emma! I called, my voice breaking through her conversation. She hung up and walked into the living room, her expression serious. What's going on? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I was just talking to a lawyer, she replied, her tone matter-of-fact. I wanted to make sure we have a plan in place if Dad tries to fight back. My heart sank. A lawyer? Emma, this is getting serious. Are you sure you want to do this? I asked, my voice trembling. Mom, he stole from us. He can't just walk away without consequences, she said, her eyes fierce. I felt a swell of admiration for her determination, but I also worried about the path she was choosing. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with thoughts of Mark and the chaos he had unleashed on our lives. I picked up my phone and stared at the screen, contemplating whether to call him. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't change anything. He had made his choice, and now it was time for us to make ours. The following day, Emma and I sat at the kitchen table, the atmosphere thick with unspoken tension. What's the plan? I asked, trying to sound calm. Emma took a deep breath, her expression serious. I've gathered everything we need. I want to confront Dad. I need him to know that we're not going to let him get away with this. My heart raced at the thought. Confront him? Are you sure that's a good idea? I asked, my voice shaking. What if he reacts badly? Emma met my gaze, her eyes unwavering. I can handle it, Mom. I've been preparing for this moment. He needs to understand that his actions have consequences. As the day wore on, I felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. I knew Emma was right. We couldn't let Mark walk away without facing the repercussions of his actions. But the thought of confronting him filled me with dread. What if he lashed out? What if he tried to manipulate her again? That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over our home, I heard the familiar sound of Mark's car pulling into the driveway. My heart raced as I exchanged a glance with Emma. Are you ready? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her expression resolute. As Mark stepped through the front door, I felt a wave of emotions crash over me: anger, betrayal, and a flicker of fear. He looked disheveled, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for something. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice laced with confusion. "Dad, we need to talk," Emma said, her voice steady. I watched as she stood tall, her posture confident, a stark contrast to the little girl I had known just weeks before. Mark's gaze shifted to me, and I could see the flicker of recognition in his eyes. "What's this about?" he asked, his tone defensive. Emma took a deep breath, her voice unwavering. "You took my college fund, Dad. You stole from me and Mom, and we're not going to let you get away with it." The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. I felt a rush of pride for my daughter, but also a pang of fear for what might come next. Mark's expression shifted from confusion to anger. "You don't understand what I was doing. I was trying to make things better for us," he shouted, his voice rising. "You think I wanted to hurt you? I was trying to invest in our future." Emma stood her ground, her eyes fierce. "You didn't invest in anything. You stole from us. You lied to us. You thought you could just walk away without facing the consequences." The tension in the room was palpable, and I felt my heart race as I watched the confrontation unfold. Mark's face twisted in anger, and I could see the desperation in his eyes. "You're just a kid. You don't know what you're talking about," he spat, his voice dripping with disdain. But Emma didn't flinch. "I know exactly what I'm talking about. I've been researching everything you did. I have the emails, the bank statements, everything. You can't hide from this anymore." Mark's expression shifted, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. "You think you can take me down? You think you're smarter than me," he sneered, but there was a tremor in his voice that betrayed his bravado. "I don't have to be smarter than you, Dad. I just have to be stronger," Emma replied, her voice steady. "And I am. I'm not going to let you destroy our lives and walk away without facing the consequences." The confrontation reached a boiling point, and I felt a surge of emotions: fear for Emma, anger at Mark, and a deep sense of pride for my daughter's courage. "Mark, you need to listen to her," I said, my voice firm. "You can't just dismiss her like this. She's right. You've hurt us, and it's time to face the truth." Mark's expression darkened, and I could see the anger boiling beneath the surface. "You think you can just gang up on me? You think you can take everything I've worked for?" he shouted, his voice rising. Emma stepped forward, her eyes fierce. "You didn't work for anything. You stole from us, and now it's time for you to face the consequences." In that moment, I realized that Emma was no longer just my daughter, she was a force to be reckoned with. She had taken control of her life, and she was ready to fight for what was right. As the confrontation unfolded, I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. We were no longer victims. We were survivors, ready to reclaim our lives. Mark's face twisted in anger, and I could see the desperation in his eyes. "You'll regret this," he spat, his voice low and threatening. But Emma stood her ground, her expression unwavering. "No, Dad. You're the one who will regret this. You've underestimated us for too long." As the confrontation reached its peak, I felt a surge of hope. Emma was right. We were stronger together. We would not let Mark's actions define us. We would rise from the ashes of his betrayal and reclaim our lives, one step at a time. The confrontation hung in the air like a storm cloud, charged with tension and unresolved emotions. Mark's face twisted in anger, but I could see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Emma stood tall, her resolve unshaken, and I felt a surge of pride for the young woman she had become. "You've underestimated us for too long," she repeated, her voice steady and unwavering. Mark's bravado began to crack. "You think you can just take me down? You're just a kid," he shouted, but there was a tremor in his voice that betrayed his fear. "You don't know what yo." "I know exactly what I'm doing," Emma replied, her tone calm yet fierce. "I've documented everything. I've spoken to a lawyer. You can't just walk away from this." The weight of her words hung in the air, and I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. We were no longer victims. We were fighters, ready to reclaim our lives. Mark's expression shifted from anger to desperation. "You don't understand the pressure I was under," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "I was trying to make things better for us. I thought I could pay it back. By stealing from your own daughter. Emma shot back, her eyes blazing. You thought you could take our money and just replace it later? That's not how this works, Dad. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the realization dawning on Mark, the weight of his actions crashing down on him. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought I could fix it. Fix it, Emma echoed, her voice rising. You can't fix this by running away. You need to face the consequences of your actions. In that moment, I felt a shift in the atmosphere. Mark's anger began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of defeat. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice trembling. I want you to take responsibility, Emma said, her tone firm. I want you to acknowledge what you did and make it right. Mark looked at her, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of remorse in his eyes. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I was doing what was best. Emma's expression softened slightly, but she didn't back down. Sorry isn't enough, Dad. You need to show us that you mean it. You need to help us recover what you took. As the weight of the moment settled over us, I felt a sense of hope. Perhaps this confrontation could lead to healing, not just for Emma and me, but for Mark as well. We can work together, I said, my voice steady. But you need to be honest with us. No more lies. Mark nodded slowly, his expression shifting from anger to vulnerability. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The tension in the room began to dissipate, replaced by a fragile sense of understanding. Emma and I exchanged a glance, a silent agreement passing between us. We would hold him accountable, but we would also give him a chance to redeem himself. In the weeks that followed, Mark began to take steps to rectify his mistakes. He worked with Emma and me to recover the stolen funds, reaching out to the bank and the authorities to address the fraud. It was a long and arduous process, filled with moments of tension and uncertainty, but we faced it together as a family. Emma's strength and determination shone through as she navigated the complexities of the situation. She took the lead in communicating with the bank, her confidence growing with each conversation. I watched in awe as she transformed from a scared little girl into a fierce advocate for herself and her future. As we worked through the recovery process, I found myself reflecting on the journey we had taken. The betrayal had shattered our lives, but it had also revealed the strength within us. Emma had shown me that resilience could emerge from even the darkest moments, and I was grateful for the bond we had forged through this experience. One evening, as we sat together at the kitchen table, I looked at Emma and smiled. I'm so proud of you, I said, my voice filled with emotion. You've handled everything with such grace and strength. She smiled back, her eyes shining. I couldn't have done it without you, Mom. We're a team. In that moment, I realized that we had not only survived the storm, we had emerged stronger and more united than ever. The experience had changed us both, and I felt a renewed sense of hope for the future. As the weeks turned into months, we began to rebuild our lives. Mark continued to work on making amends, and while the road to recovery was long, we faced it together. Emma's college fund was slowly replenished, and I felt a sense of relief knowing that her future was secure once again. One day, as we sat in the living room, Emma turned to me with a thoughtful expression. Mom, do you think Dad ever really loved us? She asked, her voice quiet. I paused, considering her question. I think he loved the idea of us, I replied slowly. But when loving us became inconvenient, he chose himself instead. Emma nodded, her expression thoughtful. That's what I thought too, she said, pulling her stuffed elephant closer. As I tucked her into bed that night, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We had faced the darkness together, and while the scars of betrayal would always remain, they had also forged a bond that was unbreakable. In the months that followed, Emma continued to thrive. She became an advocate for financial literacy among her peers, sharing her story and helping others understand the importance of protecting themselves. I watched in awe as she transformed her pain into purpose, using her experience to empower others. As I reflected on our journey, I realized that Mark's betrayal had not destroyed us. It had revealed our true strength. We had built something beautiful from the ashes of his deceit, a bond of love, resilience, and hope. And as I watched Emma grow into a remarkable young woman, I knew that we would face whatever challenges lay ahead together, stronger than ever.